my wonderful friends. Welcome to part 1 of my January wrap-up. So I decided to split this into 2 parts because total for the month of January I have 18 books. And that's kind of a lot, and depending on how chatty I get about some of these, it could end up being a very long video, and I'm trying to avoid that. So we're splitting them into 2 different videos. This one is going to be the books I read for the Bookworm's New Year readathon, and then part 2, which should be coming on Friday, will be my stats and then all the rest of the books I read during the month. So while I didn't finish the entire bingo card for the Bookworm's New Year readathon, and hopefully I can put a picture of it up if I can find it, I did get, I think, about 6 of the prompts. I at least made an attempt. So let's just go ahead and start. I don't remember exactly what prompt each book went for, so maybe I'll try to like insert the prompt like in editing, because I didn't plan ahead that well. The first book here is Stiff, The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers by Roach. I ended up giving this 3 stars, and I was a little bit surprised that I rated it that low because so many people talk about this, rave about this, absolutely love Roach. So I had anticipated that I would love her too. And I honestly just felt kind of mediocre about it. Most of it was a little bit bland to me. So the blurb on the front says, one of the funniest and most unusual books of the year, gross, educational, and unexpectedly side-splitting. There are parts that are gross, and there are parts that I guess are educational, but there was nothing side-splittingly funny about this. I saw the jokes. It's not like I just didn't get them. Like, I saw them. But, like, at best, they elicited a smirk. Like, there was never anything I actually laughed out loud at. A lot of times I just rolled my eyes because I thought it was stupid. That being said, I'm not, like, totally writing Roach off. I did enjoy this enough that I think I want to try some of her other works just to see if maybe it was just the topic. I don't know. Like, this should be pretty interesting. I mean, I'm okay with morbidity and talking about various things that cadavers are used for. So like when you donate your body to science, you don't typically get to say what it's specifically going to. So sometimes it's people who are practicing embalming, sometimes it's going to anatomy classes so students can get like hands-on experience with surgery. Sometimes you end up being essentially a crash test dummy. Yeah, various things. It was interesting enough, I guess, but overall I just felt kind of meh about it. The next book I read, and I actually do know that this one was for one of your 2021 goals, and one of my 2021 reading goals is to read more translated works. So I picked up Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is actually more like a collection of short stories or vignettes, and they all surround this little cafe in which you can time travel, but there are a lot of rules. One being that you have to sit in this specific seat, you can't leave this specific seat, and pretty much you're only time traveling back to occurrences that happened in the cafe. Since, I mean, if you can't leave the seat, obviously whatever you're trying to revisit has to have happened there. And then you have to be back in the present before the coffee gets cold, hence the title. I read the first story in its entirety, and frankly I hated it. I didn't like the characters, I didn't like the dialogue, I didn't really like the overall premise of all the weird rules. Look, this is one of those where it's better in theory than it is in practice. It's also possible that I just don't like the short story format, and I wasn't really sure, like, I don't know how to rate translated works, because on the one hand, what I am rating is the translation, but on the other hand, I feel weird because like, to rate a story when I'm reading it in a language that it wasn't really initially meant to be read in feels a little odd, because I'm definitely missing something. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I ended up DNFing it, so I didn't even have to rate it anyway. The next book I read, and I actually remember the prompt for this one too. It was supposed to be read a favorite book from 2011. I didn't have a favorite book from 2011 because I wasn't really reading at that point. So I chose one from 2012, which is when I was reading. And that was Through the Door by Jodi McIsaac. Okay, so when I first read this, I absolutely adored the story. I ended up binge reading through pretty much the entire series as they came out. This time, however, I'm definitely a little bit more discerning in the books I choose to read. I definitely notice more about writing style. I'm more aware of plot holes and things of that nature. I'm for sure a little bit pickier in what I consider to be good writing. I feel like people are going to get mad when I say this, but you can tell this is a self-published novel. It is not as polished as you would expect something that was like from a mainstream publisher, or just really even an indie press. I think books tend to be more polished because more people have their hands on them, more people are looking at them, more people are pointing things out that don't make sense. And this suffered because it didn't have that type of oversight, I guess. So I ended up giving it 2.5 stars, and the 2.5 stars that I gave it were purely based on enjoyment of the story. That's it. Like, there was a nostalgia factor, obviously, and it still is like a really fast-paced read. The basic premise of Through the Door is that we're following this main character, and she has a daughter, and the father of her daughter had disappeared, like, while she was pregnant. He didn't even know she was pregnant when he took off. So he doesn't even know he has this kid. And she realizes one day that her daughter has this ability to, like, open a door, like a literal physical door, and instead of it being whatever room is supposed to be behind that door, it's whatever she is thinking about. So, like, initially she opens this door and, like, freaking Egypt is on the other side. And they live in Canada, so it's definitely not normal. Really cool premise. It's all based around Celtic mythology, so if that's something that you're interested in, there is some discussion there, and it's very magical. However, the plot holes are many and varied, and the author just, like, writes herself out of them in, like, one sentence, here you goes, and it's very bizarre. It's very bizarre. So, story, very fun. Writing, terrible. Terrible. I do think I might continue with the series just to see if the writing improves at all, because I honestly don't remember. The next book I read, these are not really actually in any particular order, I don't think. I just kind of, like, chucked them in however I had them set up. Anyway, Such a Fun Age by Kiley, Reid. I think I read this book for the prompt Top of Your TBR, if I'm not mistaken. And this was so good. So good. I'm actually kicking myself that I didn't read it sooner. So if you haven't heard, the premise is Such a Fun Age, and, like, it's been so talked about for, like, the past year that I'd be amazed if you hadn't. But we have this black woman, her name is Amira, and she is a babysitter for this rich white family, and she adores this little 2-year-old that she babysits for. And she is at a friend's party one night, it's like a birthday party, and she gets a call from the family. It's pretty late, like, it's like 10 or 11 at night, and they're having some kind of an emergency, and they just ask her, can you please just come pick up Briar, who's the little 2-year-old girl that she babysits for, and just take her to this local grocery store that's open late. The little girl has, like, she enjoys weird things. Like, she likes to look at, like, the assorted nuts that you can buy in bulk. She enjoys looking at the teas. Like, she's a strange kid. She's completely endearing. Anyway, so Amira's like, hey, just so you know, I'm at a party and I definitely don't look like a babysitter right now. And they're like, we super don't care. Can you please just help? And she's like, sure. So she goes and she picks up the little kid, and they're at the grocery store, and everything more or less seems fine until she's approached by a security guard, this older white woman who initially had been interacting with them and like being cutesy with Briar and stuff. She went and got the security guard because she got it in her head that Amira must have kidnapped Briar. And so the security guard like won't let her leave the store. Very, very, very horrible situation. So she gets Briar's dad on the phone, and he comes up and he's like, hey, no, like, you're completely off base here. Anyway, a second factor here is that this other man who'd been in the grocery store starts filming the encounter because in his mind, like, obviously this is not okay, and based on kind of the interactions, he's thinking that if she wants to escalate the situation and press charges, it'll be good to have the proof. Now, Amira wants nothing to do with that. She goes, do you see the way I look right now? Like, why would I want that all over the internet? Why, like, it's not worth it to me to press charges. And he's like, okay, but here, I'm going to email you the video just so you have it, in case you decide you want to do something later. And she's like, okay, cool. God, this book was so good. Okay, I love Amira. First things first, like, she's in her mid-20s, she has a degree, but she's in this situation which I kind of can relate to, where you can kind of do pretty much anything. Like, you're a fairly capable person, and you don't really have anything that you're passionate about, but you're pretty okay with most things. So you have a really hard time pinpointing what you want to do with your life. Because you're like, yeah, that could work. Oh, that could work too. I'm sure I could make that work. Like, so she's just kind of floundering a little bit. Anyway, the character dynamics are just phenomenal, and I could probably talk about this book for hours. And I had like a lot of notes and stuff written down. My problem is that I think if I get too in-depth about it, I'm going to end up giving away too much information, and it's going to take something out of the reading of the story. So I think I'm just gonna stop here, because I really want people to just read this book and enjoy it. I don't want to give away too much information. Actually, one of the first books I read this year, and I think I had selected this for a book written by a person of color, I think was the prompt. I don't know, I'll double check. And that is The Girl with the Louding Voice by Daré. This was amazing. It's one of those books that I felt in my soul. It didn't really make me cry or anything, but it definitely made me consider my life in a new light. And I find that a lot of the books I've been reading lately have been doing that. This particular one, we have this young girl, her name is Adini. She lives in Nigeria. She is passionate about education. She wants to go to school. She loves to teach the other small children in her village. Her mother dies, and her mother had made her father, Adeni's father, promise not to marry her off really young, to allow her to keep getting her education. But Adeni's father is not really a fabulous person. And he decides that instead of, you know, sacrificing himself and or working, he's just going to marry Adeni off, because people like will pay like a bride price essentially for these women. So he marries her off to this man who already has 2 other wives, and it's horrifying actually. She's not enjoying her experience at all. The original wife is just mean, and there's not much that Adeni can do about it. So eventually she manages to extricate herself from the situation. She more or less gets sold into slavery, is essentially what it is. And it really sucks because she thought she was getting help when all this man really does is he places these girls in domestic service jobs, but he takes all their earnings. So Adeni's doing all this work and she's getting nothing. The woman at the house is quite abusive, and it's just not a good situation at all. She ends up meeting this woman who is a neighbor. And she wasn't really raised in Nigeria, so she has different thoughts and ideas about things like servants and just women being educated, things of that nature. And their relationship is just phenomenal. Like, watching Adeni learn and grow and come into her own and finally be able to get what she deserves was just such an enjoyable ride. And I'm pretty sure I read this book in like a day because I just didn't want to put it down. I was rooting for her so hard that I just needed to know that she was going to be okay. So I actually really recommend this book. I think I gave this one 5 stars as well. The last book I read for the Bookworm's New Year readathon was The Henna Artist by Alka Joshi. I think this was for a debut author? I don't know. Hopefully I remembered to put the prompts on the screen. This was really good. If I remember correctly, Alka Joshi wrote this book based on her mother's story. And this takes place in India shortly after India has gotten its freedom from Britain. And we're following Lakshmi. She is, I think, around 30. She's a henna artist in Jaipur. She had been married and she walked out on an abusive husband. She finally was able to make a life for herself in Jaipur. She's a highly skilled henna artist. She has the trust of a lot of women in this town that are very high ranking. Suddenly though, her ex-husband essentially comes back into her life, dragging along a 13-year-old sister that she didn't know she had. Or she's 15. I don't know, she's pretty young. And Lakshmi is like floored because she didn't know she had a sister. And on finding out that she has a sister, she's also finding out that her parents have died. Which is, it's kind of a lot. It is kind of a lot in one day. This book is so good. There's a lot of discussions about family and loyalty, but there's also a lot of discussion about women and childbirth and how desperate women can be to protect themselves from having another baby forced upon them. Such good conversations in here, and the setting was absolutely delightful. I loved all the characters. Like, even the times when certain characters were behaving imprudently and were kind of just frustrating, I still loved them and I cared for them and I could understand why they were behaving in that manner. Just such a good book. I'm so very glad that I picked this one up this year. It does have a sequel coming out, but I believe it's more of a companion rather than a direct sequel. So I might pick it up because it's just more like a companion novel. I'm not really sure because I was also just satisfied with where the story ended. So I think I'll have to read a synopsis of the sequel before I actually make up my mind. I don't think it comes out till spring sometime, so I have some time to think on it. So those are the books that I read for the Bookworm's New Year readathon. God, I hope I'm saying that right. I will link, I think the TBR and stuff, like all the information about the readathon was in my TBR video. I think it was just my winter reading plans video. So I will link that in the description box. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or if maybe you want to read any of these books after hearing me talk about them. If you're new here and you like my content, subscribe. Stick around. I'd love to see you in my comments. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you soon. Bye.